What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. We are just 4 nights into the 2025 college football season, and this has all the makings of being one of the wildest ones in recent memory. This season so far is giving me 2007 vibes, and if you're on the younger side of my demographics and you don't know too much about how infamous that 2007 season was for the lore of college football, basically what made that season so chaotic was the amount of upsets that happened. It seemed like being the number one ranked team that season was a curse because anytime a team got newly ranked number one, they ended up losing as soon as it happened. And there also were a bunch of upsets that happened during that season as well, along with a bunch of wild moments. So far, the 2025 season kind of has a little bit of that same vibe to it. None of us, even if you're a Florida State fan, maybe a few of you had hope that Florida State could upset Alabama. But how many of you guys had hope and truly had belief that Florida State was going to take down Alabama? I'm going to be honest, I was completely wrong about this game, and I have no problem coming out and admitting it, especially with how badly Florida State has damaged my pockets today. Betting against this team, 31-17 was the final score. It kind of sounds hard to actually believe that it was real, but it happened. And we're going to dive into it. Trust me, we're going to dive into it, man. I have some thoughts about this game. How about Arch Manning having the worst debut that we've ever seen for a quarterback that has received the amount of hype that Arch Manning has gotten throughout this offseason? Remember when Paul Firebaum said that Arch Manning was going to be the greatest player in the history of college football? He was going to be just as good as what Tim Tebow was? Well, those comments, those statements, those bold claims aren't aging too well with how Arch Manning just got cold feet on the road against the defending national champions. How about Brian Kelly finally getting a season opening win 4 years into being LSU's head coach? You know what they say, better late than never. We'll talk about what this win over Clemson shows about what LSU is going to be this season. And we're going to talk about Tennessee. Yeah, for all of you guys who think I'm a Tennessee hater, I watched Tennessee smackdown on Syracuse earlier today. So yeah, we're going to talk about the Vols also, man. I'm so happy that we have college football back, man. If you're ready for some more college football action, like, subscribe, turn on post notifications. We're going to be dropping content like it's nobody's business. We're covering college football 24/7, 365 days throughout the year, along with the NFL as well. If you are a diehard fan of football, you live, eat, breathe, and sleep this sport, JT Sports is the right place for you. If you don't want the starting quarterback of your favorite team to look like how Arch Manning did against Ohio State today, go ahead, give us a 5-star review. JT Sports, available on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. The links are down in the description and pinned comment below. Let's dive into it. David is now 3-0 all-time against Goliath. The first time David made the giant kneel beneath him was when he took him down with a prayer and a few stones. The second time he took down Goliath was 2024 when Alabama went into Vanderbilt as the number one ranked team in the nation, and they walked out with the biggest upset loss in the history of college football. Despite being a multiple touchdown favorite over Vanderbilt in that game, the Commodores humbled the Tide. And then a few hours ago, we saw David pull off the trifecta against Goliath, slaying the giant on his knees for one last time with Florida State beating Alabama 31-17. And yes, that final score is real. It sounds hard to believe that it's real, but if you go on ESPN, Bleacher Report, The Score, any app that you use to keep up with the college football alerts and scores throughout the day, you'll see 31-17 FSU over Alabama. before we get into criticizing Alabama, and trust me, there's going to be a lot of that, we have to praise Mike Norvell and Florida State. You talk about a turnaround, and a quick one at that, coming off the season from hell, 2-10, just fresh off winning the ACC championship. Mike Norvell has already changed the conversation about this season for Florida State. Going into this offseason, all you heard about Florida State football was, when is Mike Norvell going to get fired? Who's going to replace him? Is Florida State even going to make it to a bowl game? That's what the talk was about this team. And this wasn't a game that you are really going to use to judge what Florida State would be this year, because Alabama had a talent advantage. They had a huge coaching advantage. They were the better overall team than what Florida State was. At least that's what was thought. But there's a reason why the games were played, as they say. And Alabama, from opening kickoff to the final whistle, Florida State kicked their ass. Mike Norvell, the new coaching staff with Tony White as the defensive coordinator, Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator. This is one of the best coordinator duos in all of college football, and they were cooking up Alabama today. Kalen DeBoer got out-coached by Tony White, and their defensive coordinator got out-coached by Gus Malzahn. How about Tommy Castellanos, who was, without a doubt, the main reason why Florida State was unstoppable for Alabama? Tommy Castellanos is one of the most electric quarterbacks that the ACC has this year. He looks like a Dollar General version of Kyler Murray. He doesn't have the same athleticism and arm talent that Kyler has, but he's not too far off. When he runs that ball, he gets 0 to 100 really freaking fast. He's very shifty in the open field. He's just a very hard guy to get your hands on, to bring down for a tackle. And you can see a drastic improvement with how Florida State looks due to the impact of getting Tommy Castellanos. He's miles better than what DJU, Brock Glenn, Luke Kromenhawk were for this team last year. It's funny how solid quarterback play can change a lot about your team. And Tommy Castellanos, we were criticizing this dude. We were asking if this dude needed to check into Arkham Asylum when he made some comments a few months ago about how Alabama wasn't going to have Nick Saban in this game to stop him. And we all laughed at him. We said that he was giving Alabama unnecessary billboard material. Why is he saying these ridiculous things for a team that just went 2-10? Well, everything that Tommy Castellanos said, he backed up on the field. Talk is cheap, game is game. If you're going to talk a lot of shit, you got to be able to back it up on the field. And Tommy Castellanos did that. He was just unstoppable. Third down, Alabama couldn't get Tommy Castellanos on the field. In the red zone, Tommy Castellanos was scoring. You blitz Tommy Castellanos, he was destroying you over the top. There was nothing that Tommy Castellanos couldn't do against Alabama's defense today. There was nothing that Florida State's defense couldn't do to stop Alabama's offense. Alabama's offense still has the same problems this year that they had last year. And it's funny because I put most of the blame on Jalen Milroe for how Kalen DeBoer's first season went. Well, Kalen DeBoer, he gets his tag team partner Ryan Grubb back at offensive coordinator. You're expecting for the offensive line to be improved. You are expecting for Alabama to finally be able to run the football effectively. You didn't see none of those improvements in this game against Florida State. If anything, you kind of watch this game and you might have to apologize to Jalen Milroe after. Because Jalen Milroe, there were a lot more problems than just him last year. And I'm starting to believe that Kalen DeBoer might be one of them. Now, I'm not about to bail on Kalen DeBoer because of this loss. Yes, it's disgraceful. It's despicable. Alabama should never be losing to any team that they're favored to beat by 2 touchdowns or more. But this is a gut check for Kalen DeBoer in Alabama. Sometimes a loss this shocking early during the season, it's the gut check that you need to get yourself in order. We saw Notre Dame lose to Northern Illinois last year and finish being in the national championship. When Michigan beat Ohio State, despite being a 3-touchdown underdog in that game, a lot of people gave up on Ohio State. They thought they were going to be an easy first or second round exit in the playoffs. They ended up making it all the way to the national championship. So it's not always about how you start, but it's about how you finish. Life is 10% about what happens to you and 90% about how you respond. How is Alabama going to respond after this loss? Alabama has the highest blue chip ratio in college football. They have the most 5 and 4 stars on their team than any other squad in college football this year. But you couldn't tell with how Florida State just dragged Alabama all throughout Doak Campbell for 3 hours today. Florida State pretty much went up to Alabama and said, give me your lunch money. Alabama said no. Florida State said, bet. We finna run them pockets. So they steal Alabama's lunch money. They put the beats on them. They stomp them. They drag Alabama's shirt over their head and continue to beat up on them, give them 2 black eyes and a wedgie to add insult to injury. Alabama, after losing to Florida State, they need to go in the closet and they need to hide for 3 days. Don't show themselves on social media. Don't even step out in public to go to the corner store to get you a Gatorade. Sleep in that closet for 3 days and come out looking like the Alabama team that we saw before Nick Saban retired. The grace period for Kalen DeBoer is over. When you're at a school like Alabama with the resources and the talent that Nick Saban has given Kalen DeBoer, it's playoffs or bust every single year. Last year's a grace period because of the situation that went on with him taking his job late, due to him not being able to bring in a true transfer portal class of his liking. Last year wasn't his team. This year is his team. And if this is what Kalen DeBoer's Alabama looks like, then they need to just go ahead and give him the pink slip early. Maybe Kalen DeBoer needs to go back to wearing T-shirts. He was out there wearing a collared shirt. And when I saw Kalen DeBoer out there wearing a collared shirt, that's when I knew Alabama was going to lose this game, because he let the fans get in his head. He heard all the criticism that the fans had about him not wearing a collared shirt, him not looking that presentable on the sidelines. Well, F presentation. How about just going out there to coach to win, not going out there to coach to look good? What's Kalen DeBoer trying to do? I'd rather T-shirt Kalen DeBoer come back. The Kalen DeBoer that wore that T-shirt was the same Kalen DeBoer that beat Kirby Smart, that blew out LSU and embarrassed Brian Kelly. Alabama only lost 1 game against ranked teams last year. So I still have a lot of faith that Kalen DeBoer can right the ship. His issue is that he plays down the competition. He never has Alabama ready to play against the ants that they are supposed to be smashing with a sledgehammer, but he always has them up for the big game. Maybe that's look ahead syndrome. Maybe Alabama was looking too far ahead and they overlooked Florida State, and that's why they got smacked in the mouth. Alabama got humbled today, straight up. They got out coached, they got outplayed, they got out physical, they got out everything against Florida State. And it's very scary. And if you're asking me right now, what is this season going to be for Alabama? I'm still going to tell you they make it to the playoffs and they win the SEC. But I don't say that with the same level of conviction, with the same level of confidence now that I had a few weeks ago when I made that prediction. Now I do have a few question marks about Kalen DeBoer. Is he the wrong guy for this job? Is he coaching in a location that, from a personality standpoint, he just doesn't mesh well? It's the culture of Alabama just not right for the personality of Kalen DeBoer. There's a lot of questions that we have about Alabama. The same questions that we asked about Florida State around the same time last year when they lost to Georgia Tech and they lost to Boston College. You are asking yourself, is Florida State just this bad? Or are the teams that they lose into just that good? And you were asking that question about Florida State for a month and a half until you finally accept the reality that That's who Florida State was, a 2-10 team. Is Alabama the team that we saw lose to Florida State today? And if they are, I guarantee you that means they win 7-8 games, they miss the playoffs once again, and we start asking, when does Kalen DeBoer get fired? I'm not about to start out those conversations right now because there still is a lot of football to be played, but this loss was an abomination, and it was downright disgusting to watch. And I'm not even an Alabama fan, but as somebody that's a fan of the sport and somebody that had Alabama on my parlay today, I'm very, very ticked off with this loss. Ohio State 14, Texas 7. This is another game that I didn't expect it to go the way that it did, in terms of this being a matchup between the 85 Bears defense versus the 2000 Baltimore Ravens defense. We were watching old school 1945 football. Nothing but defense. Offense is a rarity. Arch Manning was the most hyped quarterback that we've ever seen college football have. And going into this game against Ohio State, the expectations were very high for him. He was expected to have a solid outing. He wasn't expected to look all world because we know how good Ohio State's defense is, even with the question marks that were surrounding their new defensive coordinator, Matt Patricia, who replaces Jim Knowles, who left for Happy Valley. You only bring back 3 starters on the defensive side of the ball. But with how good Ohio State recruits, you still somewhat gave Ryan Day the benefit of a doubt that he made the right decision to hire Matt Patricia. And boy, did Matt Patricia put on a coaching clinic against Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning. They had no counterpunches for the shots that Matt Patricia was throwing at them. I mean, the coverages that he was disguising, the alignments that he was throwing out were confusing Arch Manning. Steve Sarkisian's play calling wasn't able to adjust to what Matt Patricia was throwing out there. And Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian, I give both of them the same amount of blame for Texas losing this game. You can't put all of this loss on Arch Manning underperforming and being clearly overwhelmed by the hostile environment that he was in. I mean, anybody with the amount of hype of Arch Manning would have got cold feet in this situation. Texas offensive line, they weren't holding up well against Ohio State's defensive front. They couldn't generate any big plays in the passing game. The explosives that you saw Arch Manning have last year when he was starting 2 games for the Longhorns, you didn't really see a lot of those explosiveness in this game. And anytime Arch Manning did try to throw the football downfield, he did try to generate an explosive play. It didn't go his way. Matt Patricia deserves not only the game ball, but he deserves a lot of apologies for Ohio State fans and non-Ohio State fans who criticize the decision that Ryan Day made to hire this guy. He was getting criticized for things that happened nearly a decade ago, him not working out as the head coach of the Detroit Lions. What the hell does the NFL have anything to do with college football, especially when you're serving in 2 different roles? When he was coaching the Lions, he was the head coach. He had to oversee the entirety of the team. When you're just a coordinator, you only have to worry about just coaching the defense, just calling the plays. This was Bill Belichick's left-hand man. For all of the success that Bill Belichick had against rookie quarterbacks and against some of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, Matt Patricia was just as integral in those wins, in those big games against some of those best offenses ever that the Patriots shut down as what Bill Belichick was. So I always had a lot of confidence that Matt Patricia was going to be a great fill-in for Jim Knowles, but I was not expecting for Matt Patricia in his debut as Ohio State's defensive coordinator to hold Texas to only 7 points in this game. Ohio State's offense wasn't that good either. Julian saying he didn't look too much better than Arch Manning, but the difference is that Julian Saying got the win. He did what Ohio State needed him to do to win a very close and competitive game. Arch Manning When they got that touchdown and it was 14-7 and he got an opportunity with the ball in his hands to send this game to overtime, he was unable to deliver. That's the moment that let me down the most with Arch Manning. Because one thing about the greats, it doesn't matter how bad of a start they get out to, they always end up finishing out strong. Patrick Mahomes has played some of his worst games ever in the Super Bowl and still has been able to win them because he dominates the fourth quarter. I thought that we were going to see Arch Manning rise to the occasion late in this game. I never felt this was going to be a game that was going to be decided before the final 2 minutes. The last 2 minutes ultimately told us who won and lost this game. Texas was unable to get offense when they needed it. And the turning point in this game for Texas is when they got stopped on that tush push, which is a play that has a very high percentage when it comes to scoring in that situation. I thought they were going to get it, but they didn't look organized. They looked discombobulated before they ran the tush push. And when you're running the tush push, it seems simple to execute, but it's not in all hindsight. Everybody has to be on the same page. You got to get everybody settled down. And when Arch Manning snapped the ball on that tush push, it seemed like the guys behind him didn't even know that they were supposed to push him forward. So he gets stopped. And the red zone play calling the Steve Sarkisian strikes again. For as good as the offensive mind is what Steve Sarkisian is, he sucks calling plays in the red zone. Red zone play calling is what lost Texas that game against Ohio State in the semifinals last season. And it costed them again today in this game, along with the fourth down play calling as well. This was a conservative effort by Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning to lose this game. Matt Patricia, he's going to be a fantastic defensive coordinator for Ohio State. After watching the clinic and the amount of frustration that he gave Steve Sarkisian and Arch Manning, it's safe to say that the Buckeyes defense is not falling off. And may I dare say that Ohio State's defense, with Matt Patricia calling plays, could be a tad bit better than what Jim Knowles' defense was. Ohio State had Arch Manning out there looking like he was Anthony Richardson. He was a checkdown machine, was scared to throw the football downfield, and he had no accuracy when he even attempted to throw the football downfield. He was rattled. Arch Manning has 3 weeks to get back right before Texas goes on the road and they play Florida. This season can go left really fast for Texas if they hang their heads down too long on this loss. There's no shame in losing to the defending national champions on the road, especially against a defensive coordinator with the resume and the prestige of Matt Patricia. This is just one of those games that Arch Manning has to look at and just chalk up as one that wasn't one of his best and get ready for the next one. In life, you got to move on fast. When you play quarterback, coaches always say that you got to have short-term memory. If you make a mistake or you have a bad game, you got to erase it out of your mind and get ready for the next one, because if you let another bad performance turn into 2 bad performances, then 2 bad performances can turn into a month of bad football, and a month of bad football can turn into a bad season if you're not careful, if you're Texas. This game doesn't show too much about what these teams will be this season, because we both expect Ohio State and Texas to be in a conversation to win it all by the end of the season. We very much could see both of these two teams rematching at some point in the college football playoffs. But for Arch Manning, though, this was an incredible letdown for the amount of hype that he has received. I was not impressed, and I don't think any of us were impressed either, but I'm not going to come down too hard on him. I believe that he will shake back. One game does not define the entirety of somebody's career, and maybe this is what Arch Manning needs to catapult himself to playing at the level that we all expected. But I was very scared with what I saw out of Arch Manning today. He was not good. This was a horrendous debut for Arch Manning. LSU 17, Clemson 10. This game went the complete opposite way that many people, myself included, thought it was going to go. I thought coming in that Clemson was going to win because their defensive line was going to overpower the new-look offensive line of LSU. I thought LSU would have a tough time establishing the run game, and eventually you will see this team fall apart in the second half with them putting too much on Garrett Nussmeier's shoulders. But this game went the way I expected it to, but for the opposite team. Clemson was the one who had a hard time being able to sustain themselves on the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line was getting pushed back all night long by LSU's defensive front. Cade Klubnik looked out of sorts at times. He was looking a little bit erratic. That improved LSU secondary that they revamped from the transfer portal, made a lot of big plays. And LSU gets Brian Kelly his first ever Week 1 win as the head coach of this program. You know what they say, better late than never. It has taken him 4 years to finally accomplish this feat. But LSU, they could have beat Clemson by an even wider margin. They left a lot of plays off the field in this game. You had a fumble in the red zone, which could have resulted in maybe a field goal or possibly a touchdown. Then you get a touchdown that gets taken away from you. You get robbed by the refs. That was an obvious touchdown catch by Barian Brown. Once the dude hits the ground, the play is over. If you hit the power line, you have scored. When a dude hits the ground, you just can't all of a sudden say, oh, it's not a catch. Once his elbow hit the ground, that's when the ball popped out and he lost control. The catch was already completed by then. What is a catch in football? I don't know. Every time I see one of these catches get overturned, I just continue to ask, what even is a catch anymore in football? We need videos of what a catch is and isn't after what I just saw with that Barian Brown touchdown that was taken off the board from LSU. And I thought at that moment, when they had to settle for the field goal and the kicker ends up botching the kick and he ends up getting injured in the process, that's when this game was going to flip and Clemson was going to start taking over. That's when they were going to get the home field advantage on their side. That's when they were going to run away with the momentum, but it never happened. LSU's defense held firm. And unlike last year, even though Blake Baker's defense was very good in terms of how they look compared to LSU in 2023, this year, though, you can actually trust this defense to go win you a game. Brian Kelly can say, hey, defense, our offense is looking so hot. Win us this game, and LSU can go do that. After beating Clemson, LSU has more than affirmed that they're going to be a national championship contender this year. With the talent that they have on this team, they're good enough to beat anybody, any place, anytime. You can see them win the SEC, get into the playoffs, and maybe be in the Final Four. This is the most talented team that LSU has had since they last won the national title in 2019, 6 years ago with Joe Burrow. They have great receivers. They can run the football now. Running the football, I feel, was the big difference in this game. LSU had 108 rushing yards compared to Clemson, who only had 31. If I told you that's what the rushing discrepancy was going to be before this game was played, you would have been shocked. LSU has a bunch of new faces on the offensive line. They're going up against a Clemson defensive line that has 2 projected top 10 picks on the interior, along with a bunch of other guys who are going to be first rounders as well next year. LSU just didn't beat your average run-of-the-mill ACC team. They beat a Clemson team that most definitely is a top 5 team in America, and they gave them a lot of fits. And I feel like this game shows more about how good LSU is going to be in a very critical year for Brian Kelly, where it seems like it's playoffs or you get fired. And I think that this loss for LSU still doesn't really change much as far as the expectations that Clemson has. They still look good enough to beat anybody. Their defense held one of the most talented offenses in college football to only 17 points. If we saw Clemson playing Texas today, who do you think would have won that game? I would have picked Clemson. With how rattled Arch Manning looked, how out of sorts that team was, I could have saw Clemson running away with that game if they played Texas right now. Clemson, just because they lost early, doesn't mean that they're an overrated team. I know it's been a while since they last beat an elite team, but it's hard to beat elite teams in college football. And maybe Clemson's win against an elite team probably may not come into the playoffs, but would you rather beat a good team in week 1 and peak early? Would you rather beat an elite team in the playoffs when it actually matters? Clemson still looked very good. They had a lot of opportunities to win this game. LSU, they just showed up and they look more prepared, because when you get a home field advantage and you end up not being able to capitalize off it like how you should against a team that has been notoriously known for imploding on the road, then you know, like, I just have to give the benefit to LSU that they were the better team. Tennessee put Syracuse in a body bag. 45-26 was the final in this thing, but this game was way more one-sided than what the actual score shows. When I started watching this game, Syracuse was starting to make somewhat of a comeback. They almost got it within 10, but eventually Tennessee's offense started going back to what they were doing in the first quarter and putting up more points. Joey Aguilar looked very impressive. Already looks miles better than what Nico Iamaleava was last year. Nico Iamaleava had a hard time hitting the deep ball last year, and he looked really timid. Joey Aguilar, he's a gunslinger. He's going to sling that thing. It doesn't matter if it's in triple coverage, quadruple coverage. Joey Aguilar, this dude is going to put a lot of risk behind throwing that football, and it's going to cost Tennessee some games, and it's going to win them some games. You got to feel really encouraged with what you saw out of Joey Aguilar for a guy who is still fairly new to Tennessee's offense. Tennessee doesn't run an offense that you can just learn and adapt to overnight. Playing in this offense requires you to kind of relearn and reprogram yourself how to play quarterback. But Joey Aguilar, the way that he was throwing these dots to Mike Williams, Chris Brazil, you know, Tennessee is still loaded at a lot of positions. Offensive line looked really good. Defensive line still looked as good as what it was last year, despite the losses of James Pierce and some of the other better players that they had on that defense last year. They picked up like it was still 2024 again. And for Tennessee this season is about proving that they no longer are in the beard or in the beat. This season for Tennessee is about proving that they no longer are in the B tier of teams in the SEC. You have your elite teams, your Georgias, your Texas, your Alabamas, and then you have your B tier programs that are good enough to compete for the SEC championship and a playoff spot, but not every single year. They have to rebuild for a year or two, and then in that third season, that's when they're able to make a run, win 10 games, get to the CFP. Tennessee is trying to change that narrative, though. Tennessee believes that they are in that elite of the SEC in terms of teams that don't have to rebuild. They just simply reload. We're about to find out just how true that belief is, because the way they smoked Syracuse shocked me, because I thought Syracuse would have been able to at least keep this a 10-point game. I took Syracuse plus 13.5. They're one of the better non-Big Ten SEC programs in college football right now with how much of a rising star that their head coach is. But there was just a clear, obvious talent mismatch between Tennessee and Syracuse from start to finish. And I got to correct myself. I called that receiver earlier Mike Williams. His name is Mike Matthews. I need to get that right. If you corrected me already in the comments, I appreciate that. But Tennessee, man, they were smoking Syracuse orange, and they were splattering the remains of that citrus, that orange inside all over Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think for Tennessee moving forward this year, the questions more so aren't about the defense. It's more so it's going to be about, can this offense continue to have the success that they had against Syracuse for the remainder of this season? Can you see Tennessee put up 38, 40 points against an Alabama, a Georgia defense? Because that's what's going to decide this season for Tennessee. You got a defense that can still win you games, but can your offense elevate the level of play this season that they didn't have last year due to the upgrade that you have at quarterback. What about Dylan Sampson? The guy who was the heart and soul of Tennessee's team last year, the guy who had the best running back season in this program's history, the guy who was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. Didn't even remember Dylan Sampson in this game. I didn't even remember that they lost Dylan Sampson with the 3 monster running backs that they have replacing them. I mean, that dude, Peyton Lewis, oh my goodness. Has he been drug tested? He's built like Hercules at running back. Seriously, how the hell do you tackle any of these Tennessee running backs? They all look like they're built like Derrick Henry somewhat, like they're all 6'2", 220, 230 pounds. I mean, they were running guys the F over in this game. I was like, holy cow. Tennessee has a quarterback. They got a new offensive line that's good, and their ground game is just as good as what it was last year. Tennessee, I'm not saying that they are going to be in the playoffs this year. I'm still not bending off that prediction, but this is a team, though, that maybe they can sneak into the playoffs again with 9 wins. With how they looked against Syracuse, man, I know it's Syracuse and the SEC teams are so much better than what Syracuse is. I get that. You don't got to lecture to me in the comment section about that. But what I am proposing to you is that maybe Tennessee doesn't have to rebuild after all. Maybe they have reloaded. The guys they have reloaded with, we just don't know too much about because they haven't proven themselves. So we'll see how Tennessee looks as we progress throughout this season. But I'm interested in Tennessee. I really am.